JavaScript is a programming language that allows you to implement complex things on web pages. Every time a web page does more than just sit there and display static information for you to look at, or display timely content, updates, or interactive maps, or let's say something like an animated 3D graphics, or just scrolling down those video jukeboxes and so on, you bet that JavaScript is probably involved. So like they say, JavaScript was initially created to make web pages alive. The programs in JavaScript are called scripts, and they can most naturally be written within the HTML, and they execute automatically as the page loads. So these scripts are executed as plain text. We'll see about that in the next few slides. However, in this aspect, JavaScript is completely different, and it could not be confused with another language called Java. They both are completely different. So what does JavaScript do? JavaScript is usually used to add new HTML elements to the page, change the content dynamically, modify styles, etc. It also reacts to a lot of user events. Even when I say user events, anything that the user does on the browser, like mouse clicks or pointer events or key press, and a lot more. Also, things like sending requests of posting a form data over to a database server, or downloading something, or even uploading files to a database are also handled by JavaScript alone. And things like getting cookies from the user, placing some cookies about to collect certain information about the user, showing alert messages, and if you've ever wondered why a browser asks for your location, that too is done by JavaScript. There's also an important part called local storage that is, again, done by JavaScript that can handle on a browser. So how does this whole thing work? This is an example of how JavaScript is embedded within the HTML. So you can notice from the previous sessions that there is a HTML so similar to HTML, but you notice that there is something in addition to the usual HTML tags in between the blue text out there called script. So that is an example of how JavaScript is. Don't worry about it if you don't understand it, but understand that it should be in between the script tags. We'll come and understand what this does at a later point of time. So there is something called as a JavaScript engine. Before we dwell into understanding or working on JavaScript, let's spend a few minutes, if not seconds, to understand how JavaScript works and what is a JavaScript engine. So JavaScript does two things. One, it renders, and then there is a place or a time where everything that is rendered is compiled into a binary, because the system does not understand a human readable language that we type as JavaScript. Everything is converted to binary. So during a JavaScript engine, the engine reads the script that is in between the HTML, and it converts that into a machine language, which is zeros and ones, and then the machine code runs, and it runs pretty fast. So what does a rendering engine do? Rendering engine manipulates the document object model. It's a DOM model, and it takes off all your HTML, all your CSS, and it will start parsing all of that into a readable or presentable place on the browser. So that's called rendering a web page. Now, there are different engines of JavaScript on different browsers. The Chrome uses something called a V8 engine, and on Mozilla, it's a similar engine. It's just named differently, called SpiderMonkey. On Safari, there is Nitro, and on Internet Explorer, there is Chakra. So that's about JavaScript. We'll need an IDE to work on. We've been using an integrated development environment called Atom and Brackets in the previous sessions. My favorite still remains the same. My choice of IDE is still Atom or Brackets, which are pretty lightweight. But there's also WebStorm. It's a paid one and really good utility, especially for those syntax errors and linter checks and a whole lot of packages from JetBrains. Visual Studio is also really good looking and has improved and evolved over a lot of time. Vim and Emacs and Sublime remain the traditional choice of many developers. It's a personal choice. It's something that you like using. So I have, just to show you, I do have a browser, and I'm using Visual Studio and Atom, but feel free to use whatever you like. All right, so that's about what JavaScript is. We need not understand this in a whole lot of detail unless we need to dwell into being understanding the research types. But just to get us started, this understanding is more than enough. I'll be supplying you with some more information to read about what JavaScript does and how exactly it works on the V8 at the end of this video. But however, for now, this knowledge should be enough to get us started. Great, so see you in a minute.